Angela. Thank you so much for watching, and happy October, happy Halloween, happy spooky season. Spooky season. I am so excited. As you guys all know, I love paranormal stuff. I love all things spooky, so October is pretty much one of my favorite months out of the year. And today I'm bringing you yet another paranormal video, but before we get into that, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button below and give this video a thumbs up. I do things all beauty and paranormal related here, so if you love that variety, I would love for you to stick around. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into these spooky stories. So I found some scary true ghost stories online. These are specifically about kids that have seen ghosts because you guys, as you guys know, probably if you're familiar with the paranormal even a little bit, they say that it's much easier for kids to be able to see ghosts than for adults too, which I think that's really just because younger minds have a bigger imagination. We as kids believe things easily, so I guess we're more easily manipulated, or it's easier to, I guess, reach a child from the other side than it is an adult. If I'm wrong, correct me, but I think that's the main reason why. I know that when I was a kid, I had paranormal experiences, at least what I believe to be paranormal experiences. I had a, imaginary friend. I couldn't think of the word. Not really a friend. I was scared of her. Her name was Dorita. This is all according to my parents. And according to me, she was a big, scary, mean dinosaur, and she used to really scare me. So, dinosaur, to me, maybe that's all I knew. I don't know. That just sounds like maybe like a demon or a goblin or something, and she was being mean to me. So I don't know. It's possible that it was just an imaginary, just my imagination. But I think that it was probably something paranormal because I also suffered from night terrors when I was little, and I did experience weird things when I was little, and to this day I still experience things. So yeah, let's go ahead and get into these stories. The first story is called The Believer. I believe that there are happenings on this earth that cannot be logically explained. I've always been a little skeptical, but I didn't completely denounce that ghosts exist. However, I'm starting to think they are definitely real, and that little kids can see them. Yesterday, Sunday, I volunteered to watch the little kids of my church while their parents were volunteering. Our church meets in the community center, so that's where I was watching the kids. One baby and two 2-year-olds, a boy and a girl. And you are right, our church is not very big. After the center cleared, it was just me and one other volunteer. She had the baby in a side room, trying to put him down for a nap. I had the 2-year-olds in my main room. I had a weird feeling all day and kept feeling like there was someone standing behind me, but chalked it up to being alone in the building. The kids and I were sitting on the floor and rolling a ball back and forth to one another when the boy asked if I could throw it instead. I said yes, and we stood up. He ran towards me and threw the ball just out of my reach. It went behind me. I did not hear it bounce. The kids looked at each other and started giggling. I whirled around and saw the ball suspended in mid-air for a split second before falling to the ground. The kids were just laughing. They just kept pointing and saying what sounded like, "The man, the man." That was all the paranormal that occurred yesterday. The kids didn't say anything about the man for the rest of the day. It freaked me out, but I wasn't scared. I just wanted to share. It was just a dream. My daughter used to tell me about a man who came into her room every night and put a sign of the cross on her forehead. I thought it was just a dream. Then my mother-in-law sent over some family photos. My daughter looked right at the picture of my husband's father, who has been dead for 16 years, and said, "That's the man who comes into my room at night." The husband later told me his father would always do the sign of the cross on his forehead when he was young. The next one is called Daddy, Who's That Man? When my daughter was younger, maybe 2.5 years old, she slept in a crib in the room next to me and my wife. One night she was stirring and maybe a little frightened, so I went in to get her and brought her to our room. She was wide awake now in our bed and not scared at all now. She was looking wondrously at the foot of our bed saying, "Look at the lights, the sparkles." Kind of playfully, she kept mentioning the lights. Then she said, "Daddy, who's that man?" pointing directly at the foot of the bed. It was definitely unsettling. We had bought the apartment from a very elderly couple who passed in the apartment a few months earlier. Probably never forget that. The captain. A parent of one of my students told us in a meeting that she was concerned about her son, 7 years old, talking about an invisible ghost who would talk to him and play with him in his room. He said the ghost was called the captain and was an old white guy with a beard. The kid would tell his mom that the captain told him when he grows up, his job will be to kill people, and the captain would tell him who needed to be killed. The kid would cry and say he doesn't want to kill when he grows up, but the captain tells him he doesn't have a choice and he'll get used to killing after a while. I was always creeped out working with that student after that. My cousin Tracy. When my niece was about 4, she had an imaginary friend which I don't remember the name of. She would blame things she did on this imaginary friend, but also talked about how this friend would watch Scooby-Doo with her. One day I thought, why don't I find out more about this friend? So I asked her to tell me about her friend, and she said, she's a she, and she's dead. And I said, okay, does she have a job? And she said, she does what my daddy does, which is that her imaginary friend was a cop. Okay, so then I said, where is your imaginary friend a policewoman at? And she said, right next to where my daddy is a policeman. And I said, okay, but then she said, I met her when I was in my mummy's belly. She touched me when I was inside. A few months before my niece was born, my cousin Tracy had died. She was hit by a train. She loved watching Scooby-Doo and had a ton of memorabilia. She was also a cop. She was a cop in the town that is right next to the one where my brother-in-law is a cop in, my niece's daddy. My niece's imaginary friend was my dead cousin. There is no other way she could have known all of that at the age of 4. Emily. When my sister was probably about 6 or 7, she had an imaginary friend named Emily. She told us Emily lived in her closet, wore an old black dress, and had long dark hair, and she was the same age as my sister. My sister played with Emily constantly. My parents started noticing my sister acting weird, just sitting in the middle of her room, whispering to Emily quite a bit and acting a lot more distant towards them. I remember a very specific day. My brother was walking by her room and my sister was sitting in the middle of her room, but she turned around and hissed at him. He was scared shitless. He told me it didn't even look like my sister. My parents ran up to her room, and I could hear my sister just screaming and screaming as loud as she could, "Get out!" I have no idea what happened in that room, but I ran to the bottom of my stairs and the screaming stopped. I saw my parents holding my sister, crying their eyes out. She was sobbing as well. I've asked her about it today. She's 24 now. She told me that Emily used to tell her to do horrible things to herself. She actually used to wake up on the roof and not remember how she got there. I'm not kidding. Apparently, Emily absolutely hated my parents, so she turned my sister against them. She hates talking about it, so I never brought up that specific night. This all happened at my old house. When we moved into a different house, Emily was gone. I'm not making any of this up. My sister's little friend was a really big deal to my family and messed things up for a long time. I'm just relieved we left that house. Jessica. A little after I was born, my sister Julia had an imaginary friend named Jessica. She was Julia's friend for a long time, when things started to get a little weird. At first, my parents shrugged it off as a normal occurrence, but after a while they began to believe that our house was haunted. One night, as my parents put me, about 1 year old, to sleep, I began to cry and point at the corner. My mom was still in there and began to try and comfort me, but I continued to cry and point at the same corner. All of a sudden, my sister walks into my room and points at the corner and yells, "Jessica, stop it!" Immediately, I stop crying and Julia says, like it is completely normal, that sometimes Jessica likes to put on scary masks and scare people. My mom, who was understandably freaked out, stammers to my sister, "Tell Jessica that if she can't play nice, she can't play here at all." A couple weeks go by and Julia tells Mom that her eyes turn green when she is mad and her voice gets deeper. My mom didn't know how to respond to this and just said, "Okay." Eventually, Julia outgrows her imaginary friend and stops playing with her. A year and a half later, my little sister Abby begins to talk. She then goes on to tell us about her friend that no one else can see. She then tells my mom about her eyes turn green when she is upset. I remember this distinctly because she dropped a pan and it scared me. She asked Abby what her name was and she said, "Jessica." The boy in the tree. My folks' farm surrounds a cemetery, and my dad and my niece were walking around down there. My niece, 4, looks up and says, "What's that boy doing up in that tree?" There was no boy, but she insisted there was and could describe him. "You are doing a good job." My wife and I overheard my 2-year-old daughter on the baby monitor wake up on Saturday morning and say, "What? Okay, I'll tell her." Then get up and come into our bedroom and told my wife, "Mary says you are doing a good job." Mary was her grandmother that she was extremely close to that passed away. The little girl. My grandfather had a camp on Lake During in New Hampshire when I was a kid. One day when I was 6 or so, I fell off the dock and into the water. I couldn't swim. While under, I distinctly remember seeing a little girl down there who told me to look up towards the sun and just keep kicking, and I'd be fine. I swam to the surface just in time for my grandfather to swoop me up and pull me back on the dock. And yes, I found out later the little girl drowned in the lake near that same spot, of course. The imaginary friend. There's a lot, I think pretty much all of these are about imaginary friends. When my daughter was 3, she had an imaginary friend named Kelly who lived in her closet. Kelly sat in a little rocking chair while she slept, playing with her. Typical imaginary friend stuff. Anyway, fast forward 2 years later, the wife and I are watching the new Amityville, the one with Ryan Reynolds, and our daughter walks out right when dead girl goes all black-eyed. Far from being disturbed, she says, "That looks like Kelly." "Kelly who?" we say. "You know, the dead girl that lived in my closet." That's creepy, but I don't know why that made me laugh. Just because she, I guess, said it so, like, you know, not disturbed and just like, yeah, like it's a normal thing. That would be terrifying to experience as a parent. Her eyes would follow it. I had tons of experiences like this when my little girl was born a few years ago. From being just a few months old, we noticed she'd randomly start looking over at something and giggling, like something was making her laugh. Her eyes would follow it around the room, and sometimes we'd feel like it stood right next to us or right behind us, and then we'd notice she was looking at it or smiling in that direction. It never caused any problems, though. In fact, when she was upset, she'd look over at it and start laughing or smiling. And if we couldn't find something we really needed, suddenly it would appear right in front of us, when we knew we'd checked there 100 times. Stopped around the time she turned 2. Punishment. I was 17 and babysitting a friend of a family's 6-year-old. He had been in bed a couple of hours, and I just peeked in to check on him. He wasn't in bed, and when I opened the door wider, I saw he was standing in the corner, facing the wall. Creepiest effing thing ever. I asked him what he was doing, and all he did was turn around, smile, and put his finger to his lips, as if to say, "Shh." I asked him again what he was doing, and all he said was, "Leave us. It is the punishment." Ooh, yeah, that gave me the chills. That would be terrifying. Even as a grown adult saying a kid do that. He doesn't have a face. My son, from the age of 3, always tells me about the creeper man who lives in my mom and dad's bedroom. He brings it up after he visits them. I made the mistake once of asking what he looks like. My son said, "Oh, he doesn't have a face." The last story is called "I Was the Same." I tend to be skeptical also, even when I love reading about paranormal stuff. The only thing that has kind of freaked me out has been my nephew a couple years ago when he was about 2.5 years old. He would talk to a man only he could see at my house and an old lady at his grandparents' house. My mother tells me I was the same, talking and playing with my grandfather for a few months after he died. I would call to him and hold conversations with him and even wish him good night before going to bed. Alright guys, that's all I have for you today. I really hope that you found these stories interesting and creepy. Definitely comment below which one is your favorite or which one creeped you out the most. Like I said, I do believe that children are more susceptible to seeing things like this and connecting with the paranormal just because they're younger and they have a bigger imagination and they just believe things more openly than we do as adults. So I just think it's easier for the paranormal and things like that to connect with kids versus adults. So I think it's very interesting. Also too, if you have had a paranormal experience when you were little, if you had an imaginary friend or something like this happen, I would love to hear about it in the comments below as well. And as always, I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!